Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to talk about on how to use the ICD. I'm your presenter. My name is Yusuf Ahmedi. I'm a mortality classification specialist and ICD consultant at the CDC Foundation. Uh, as usual, we usually start by introducing the ICD-10 coding process, which is essentially a three-step process. The first step, you enter causes of death in an international WHO medical certificate. The second step is to assign ICD codes to all causes guided by volumes 1 to 3, and then you select the underlying cause of death according to volume 2, SP1, SP2, and M1 to 4 rules. In this slide, I'm showing you the presentation outline on how to use the ICD. First of all, we'll talk about on how to use volume 1. That is the tabular list of inclusion and 4-character subcategory, cases where 2 codes for certain conditions, conventions used in tabular list, categories with the common characteristics, and then we'll dwell on how to use volume 3, the alphabetical index structure, code numbers, convention, and finally we'll briefly talk about basic coding guidelines. Now, the ICD provides an essential practical information on the classification system. It emphasizes the understanding of the purpose and structure of the ICD, statistics to analysts and for coders, highlights the consistent ICD use of all 3 volumes. This knowledge of ICD structure is crucial for effective health information analysis and coding. Let's start with volume 1, which contains the main classifications. In this volume 1, it defines the content, categories, subcategories, and tabulation lists, items used in statistical tables. It should always be used with volume 3, that is the alphabetical index. Section 2.4, volume 2, was presented in the last training, which describes the tabular list in details. The way the volume 1 is organized was described in section 2.45 and it was discussed in the last session. Just briefly, volume 1 is divided into 21 chapters, each grouping diseases by body, system, or cause. Blocks further organize related diseases based on anatomy or disease type. Each block contains 3 character categories identified by a letter and 2 digits. 4 character subcategories subdivided with a decimal point and a 4th character. Now, as you will see, the hierarchy of the structure flows from chapters, blocks, categories, subcategories. This enables both broad and precise disease coding. The use of alpha characters was discussed in the last session, and in volume 2 it is described in section 242. ICD codes use alpha characters from A to Z as the first character. We should remember that the use codes are unused and they've been left for future expansion and emergencies. There are letters which are shared, for example, in neoplasm disorders, and eye diseases, ear diseases. There are chapters which use multiple letters. For example, Chapter 2 uses C and D, Chapter 9 uses S and T, and Chapter 20 uses V, W, X, and Y. Within the tabular list, each chapter and category includes definitions, notes, and guidelines to clarify the meaning and scope of codes. These definitions help users to accurately select and interpret codes by explaining inclusions, exclusions, and diagnostic criteria. In the next 3 slides, we'll discuss 3 main areas, that is, inclusion terms, exclusion terms, and the glossary descriptions, which describe certain medical terms and concepts. This is especially so in the Chapter 5 on mental and behavioral disorders. Now, we start with inclusion terms. Now, additional diagnostic statements listed under 3 or 4 character rubrics. These represent different conditions, synonyms, or borderline cases, but are not a sub-classification of the rubric. Inclusion terms are used to clarify the scope of the rubric and distinguish boundaries between similar subcategories. We should remember that inclusion terms should be read together with the rubric title in the notes titled Includes. On the other hand, exclusion terms identify conditions that, despite seeming to fit a rubric, are actually classified elsewhere. You will find that each excluded term is followed by the correct code for its classification in parentheses. General exclusions for broader categories may appear in notes, and you will see that written excludes after the chapter, block, or category title. As an example, postpartum erysipelas is excluded from category A46. As I mentioned before, glossary descriptions in ICD, especially in Chapter 5, Mental and Behavioral Disorders, uses glossary descriptions to clarify the contents. They address cases where the same term may refer to different conditions. You should remember that these descriptions are not intended for use by coding staff. Similar definitions appear in other chapters, such as Chapter 21. In certain cases, you'll find 2 codes. This is a dual coding system which has 2 areas. The first one, the underlying disease, which is represented by a dagger symbol, and a manifestation, which is represented by an asterisk symbol. Remember, the asterisk code must never be used alone. It is mainly used for specialties which describe manifestations. The asterisk code is not applied in mortality coding, and it is important to know that the dagger code is always required for official coding. In this slide 16, I'll describe 3 different forms of dagger marked terms. The first one, if both the dagger and the asterisk codes appear, it means that all the terms use dual classification with the same alternative code. I've given here an example of tuberculosis meningitis. Now, in certain cases, only the dagger symbol appears, and all terms are subject to dual classification, but each has a different alternative asterisk code listed on each term. Here are several examples below. And in the third form, neither symbol appears. The rubric is not subject to dual classification, but individual inclusion terms may be, and these are marked with a symbol and their alternative examples. Again, you can see the examples here in the bullet points which I've shown here. There are other situations that permit optional dual coding, and this will appear in the note in volume 1 tabular list. You'll find it's written, use additional code if desired. And these are in 6 main areas. In local infections, to specify the infecting organism; in neoplasms, especially with functional activity; in neoplasm morphology, in ICD, which is not part of the main ICD; in organic mental disorders; in conditions caused by a toxic agent; and lastly, in injuries, poisoning, or adverse effects, where you use 2 codes, one from chapter 19, the nature of the injury, and chapter 20, which you specify the cause. Now, there are several conventions used in the tabular list, and we'll discuss parentheses, square brackets, colon, brace, NOS, and in titles and point dash. If we start with parentheses, these enclose supplementary words after a diagnostic term, indicating that the code applies whether or not those words are present. They are used to include the code numbers for exclusion terms. In block titles, they include the 3-character codes of categories included in that block. And lastly, they enclose dagger or asterisk code in the dual coding system, as we saw a few moments before. Square brackets are used to enclose synonyms, that is, alternative words or explanatory phrase. For example, if you see a set leprosy, you have the square bracket with the synonym Hansen's disease. It is also used for referring to previous notes. For example, they'll say, look at a note at the beginning chapter so and so. And lastly, for referring to a previously stated set of 4-character subdivision common to several categories. For example, K27, peptic ulcer, you'll see the square brackets there. The colon is used in inclusion and exclusion listing where preceding words are incomplete and need additional modifiers. These terms before the colon require 1 or more qualifying words listed underneath. For example, appendix K36 is classified there only if it is specified as chronic or recurrent. The brace, usually indicated with the vertical lines, is used in inclusion and exclusion listing to show that neither the words before nor after it are complete terms. Therefore, terms before the brace must be qualified by 1 or more of the terms following it to form a complete diagnostic phrase. For example, in this case, obstetric damage to pelvic joints and damage of the ligament, we must mention the word obstetrics. Damage to coccyx, you must mention also the word obstetrics. Now, this word NOS this abbreviation NOS, which means not otherwise specified, implies that the condition is unspecified or unqualified. It is used when information is insufficient to assign a more specific code. For example, if you say mitral stenosis, it is usually interpreted as rheumatic mitral stenosis unless otherwise stated. Then we have this phrase called not elsewhere classified, which indicates that specific variants of the condition may be found in other parts of the ICD. It serves as a warning that certain specified variants are listed and may appear in other parts of the classification. For example, if you look at J16 pneumonia due to other infectious organisms, you'll find the word not elsewhere classified, because it includes other pneumonia like chlamydia pneumonia and pneumonia due to other specific organisms. Here I've given also examples, 3 examples of other categories where not elsewhere classified is used. Then there is a word "and," which stands both for "and" and "or." For example, if you say tuberculosis of bones, it means tuberculosis of joints and tuberculosis of bones and joints. Both of them are included, the "and" and "or." Now, a point dash, if you see a point dash, it means the fourth character where subcategory code is replaced by the dash, and that you should look for a fourth character. You'll find that this point dash convention is used both in the tabular list and in the alphabetical index. Now, there are certain categories which have common characteristic, and for quality control, and also used as a basis for internal consistencies. For example, asterisk scores must always be used together with the dagger code and cannot be used alone. The other one is categories limited to one sex. Here, there are certain conditions which are restricted to 2 or more common in one sex. And lastly, there are secular categories, which I've given examples there, which are designated to secular conditions that are no longer active. You'll find more guidance here in section 432 and 452 of volume 2. Now let's look at how to use the volume 2. Let's talk about the arrangement of volume 3, the alphabetical index, structure, code numbers, and conventions. The alphabetical index, that is volume 3, is divided in 3 sections. The first section is the index of all terms from chapter 1 to chapter 19 and 21. It excludes drugs and chemicals. Then we have section 2, which indexes external causes of illness and death. That is all terms classified under chapter 20, but omitting drugs and chemicals. Lastly, section 3 lists drugs and chemicals, assigning codes for poisonings, adverse effects, and indicates the intent or the circumstance. Now, the structure of the alphabetical index uses the lead term aligned to the left with the indented modifier or qualified listed beneath them. In section 1, these modifiers often refer to varieties, sites, or circumstance relevant to coding, whereas in section 2, they denote types of accidents, occurrences, or vehicles involved. We should remember that modifiers do not impact coding, as shown in parentheses following the conditions. Now, the code numbers listed after terms indicate categories and subcategories. All three character codes mean the category has not been subdivided. When a category is subdivided, you'll find the fourth character. A dash in the fourth position signifies that the category is subdivided and specific fourth character should be looked for. Now, we'll finish this presentation by briefly going through the basic coding guidelines, which we insist or recommend that you should consult both alphabetical index and the tabular list before assigning codes. You start by determining the type of statement to be coded, and you start by consulting the alphabetical index. You look for the lead term, usually a noun or adjective, an eponym or a condition. You should always pay to any attention provided under the lead term for guidance. Then review and consider terms in parentheses and indented modifiers under the lead term. Then follow course references such as C or C also, and confirm the code in the tabular list. Always you should consider what the inclusion exclusion terms state. And if you follow these steps, you are most likely going to reach the correct code. And this ends our session. And I would like to thank all participants, and your energy and contribution made this event unforgettable. See you next time. Now, if I can talk about the exercise question, there were 4 questions. The first one on purpose of using tabular list and the alphabetical index. Question 2, we wanted you to explain the dual coding systems and provide an example. Question 3 on how are exclusion terms used in the tabular list, and then what does the dash mean in the fourth character position? What does it indicate? And below I've given answers to the questions, and we can continue discussing these. And thank you very much for paying attention. You are welcome to ask any questions, and I turn over to the chairman for further steps.